guys, how are you? Who is seeing me here for the first time? Few people. Oh, you already know me. That's nice. Usually people see me and they say, well, that guy looks a lot like that Mamãe Falei, but shorter. Because in my videos I hold the camera here and they think I'm a tall guy. But all right, who considers themselves a libertarian here? You need to go to Liberland. No, guys are hurt with me because of that live with Danilo Gentili, but no bother. Why am I here today? After Roberto saying all that, I'm thinking I'm important now. He's not talking about me, I think. What happens? I'm very connected with MBL, Kim, and those guys. When I go to give a talk, they think that my life is similar to Kim's, that I play video games, I read a lot of books, and then I go out there defending freedom. And no, actually, I had a real life. I went out there to work, and the ideas of freedom affected me more in practice than in theory. And Roberto said, well, that it's very important for us to read and understand the theoretical part to understand how to defend liberty, and that's what I'm lacking, actually. And that's one of the reasons that I'm going to live here better than I came, because you can learn with all these intellectuals and people who did a lot of good things about how to defend or advocate, even academically, what we defend. And what happened to me was different. I did chemical engineering, nothing related with economics and law, and I took a hit. And that made me question where my education came from, because when I went to work for the first time with my father, I was 16. My father had a small business, and it was a steel recycling company. It's some guy gave me a check without funds, and I went there to the bank, I deposited it, and I went to the internet banking, and it said there that there was a balance, so I released the material to the guy, but the other day the check bounced. And I said, why am I studying engineering, calculus, and I don't know that a check takes 2 days to clear? So that is related to what was asked in the previous panel, the issue of education. Where does my education comes from? And then I discovered something called MEC, the Ministry of Education. It's not going to happen here, but when I go to the first year of college or high school, I ask, who knows what mitochondria is? Everybody knows. Who knows what is a logarithm? Everybody knows. And when Kim is with me, I ask them, who knows how to do the genetic calculation to make your kid be born just like Kim, a black Japanese? It's difficult, but you can do it. If you go to a school and try to do this, go to a school and ask, what's the difference between a representative and a senator? Nobody knows. Nobody raised their hands, and people vote for that. So this type of questioning led me to understand how we are sometimes trapped in an inertia bubble. We think that everything is right, but the second shock that I got when I was working with my father, and it was my first contact with FGTS, like a severance indemnity fund for employers. And my story with that, I was seeing my father discussing with a guy. I said, what's happening, father? He said, he got a better job and he wants to go. And I said, well, congratulations, that's good for him. But he said, well, then he wants me to fire him. Why? Because otherwise he cannot get his money from FGTS. And I said, well, but haven't you paid him yet? Is it on his name, the account? No, it is. Yeah, it is in his name. But he cannot get the money that is his, belongs to him. No, it's not possible. All right, so fire him. Oh, but if I fire him, I need to pay 40% of penalty to him, and people forget about this. 10% extra to the government you need to pay if you fire someone. And I said, well, how does the government has a right of 10% on the money that it already belongs to that guy? I said, that's not possible. It's called a guarantee fund. It's the government concerned with our future. For sure that has good interest, right? Let's see that. I discovered that it's 3% per year. And then they know that that's very little. And then they add something else, plus TR, the reference tax rate. How much is that? It's 0 for more than a decade. I said, no, that's not possible. In a government where inflation is above 10 digits, it's in the teens, you have a FGTS of 3% per year. That's theft. You are not letting that guy have the same purchasing power that he should have. It's the opposite of what you expect from an investment. How people can defend that thing. And then I did my YouTube channel. I talked about FGTS. Nobody watched me. It was anonymous. I went to the first demonstration for Lula in the office, Dilma's office. Are you in favor for Lula being in Casa Civil? Are you in favor of that? Do you know what that is? I asked that to people. Are you in favor of FGTS? Yes. How much does that? What's the interest? They didn't know. It's 3% per year, but inflation is 9-10. Don't you think that that's stealing our money? Oh yes, you're right. Then I found out something very important, and I think that this is the role, the most important role, and we need to thank Roberto for that. Today, I'm a state representative, and I say to everybody, you have an institutional role to go there and to vote. It's important, right? But above that, there's the political activism. You be around some other representatives and demand things. And there's another thing that is more important on top of that, and that's what changes a nation. You never change a nation from the top down. You always change it from the bottom up. And this is the most important aspect, which is communication. One thing that I've learned with communication is more important, unfortunately, more important than what you want to say is the way that you say that. The way that you're going to present something is very important. I saw a question from a woman today related to changing the terms man for humankind. I understood her question, and I think it's an excellent question. I don't think we should change it, but I think it's a symptom of what we need in Brazil, to have sensibility to communicate the ideas that we consider correct. I'm sure that nobody here is in favor of FGTS, of the government stealing the money from employees and returning 3% per year. How can we communicate that? That's the most important thing, because people defend that thing. This is sensibility for me, and this turning point will only come through communication, and that's what we're doing here today. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here to learn with these figures and to share with you a little bit of my life. Thank you.
Winston.
I'll start here with Winston. Here, it'll be easy because nobody wants to hit me, so I can ask anything I want. But my question will be basic, but I think it's very important for you to give us an idea about how Ayn Rand has influenced your life. For me, it was more indirect. It was through practice that I reached Ayn Rand. It was not the opposite. So for searching for liberty that I found Ayn Rand. And what about you? I already had this will for freedom, but reading Ayn Rand helped me to clear that cloud, because in our mind there's a lot of confusion between principles. And when I read Atlas Shrugged, I was able to connect many ideas that were disconnected, and then later I studied her more theoretical books, and I started to see more clear the things, and I was able to prioritize what's important, what's accessory, things like that. And I started to adopt some practices to face the day-to-day. I still make a lot of mistakes. The posts, some fake posts that I share, but I do an effort to try to identify reality. There's an example. One time I was in the United States in an office having a meeting, and then some critter fell from the ceiling, some bug, and people said, "Oh, it's a termite, let's call the Terminator." and one raised went to the yellow pages, tried to search for a terminator, what's the day on the week that they could come, and so on. And the meeting was interrupted for all that. Then I looked to that bug. I hadn't seen a termite in my life, but I thought, are you sure that this is a termite? And nobody was sure. So I said, well, let's look for a picture of a termite. When we found the picture, that was not a termite. It was another bug. But people were already making decisions and calling to action, and they were going to hire a termite exterminator. And if you take that to other aspects of life, for the personal side or business, how many times we take a decision without checking reality first? Very few people go to the field to check in person. You delegate, or there's hearsay, and that's sometimes, unfortunately, I share some fake news because sometimes I believe in I trust the person who posted, and we cannot do that. We need to go to the field and check in person. So this ends up improving our decisions, even in business. And try to find what is the truth, what is the reality, through investigation and using your reason. And also establishing priorities, because sometimes we go after things that are not important. So objectivism helped me in that way. You said something that reminds me of another thing. There's a philosopher called Bertrand Russell, and when he was in the end of his life, there's a video of him. A person says to him, what tip would you give to humanity for it to improve? And then he said something that for me, I think it was the best summary of what you can say. He said, we need to learn to look to what the evidence shows us and not what we want the evidence to show us. So my channel, I play with that. Well, we need to question everything, and that's it. Those ideas that are sometimes deep within us, and we don't want to question. We just think that, well, somebody is going to do that for us. Yes, because you having freedom, that brings responsibility, and that's an interesting thing, because not always people are ready to want freedom, because it comes with responsibility, and it's much easier to delegate that, to say someone else is responsible for that. I don't want to have that choice. So this is an important thing. I will pass here to Candido. Candido, let's go. What do you think about the difficulty that we have today to apply ideas of freedom, and what was the biggest challenge that you found when you found Ayn Rand's ideas? Thank you, Arthur. It's a pleasure to meet you and to see you in a non-hostile environment. I follow your channel since the beginning, and I thought that you could be objectivist since the first time that I saw your channel, due to the let's question everything, because Ayn Rand, she has a sentence there, check her premises. So it's a very objectivist thing that you maybe unconsciously did. My contact with Ayn Rand happened, I would say, in a very impacting way. In 1982, I applied to do a summer seminary promoted by Cato Institute. It was the second summer seminar. Cato at the time was still a small libertarian think tank that was founded in San Francisco and was moving to Washington. And I applied a few months before. They were supposed to send me a reading package for me to get ready for the seminar, but at that time I don't know if you know, but Brazilian Post was a public company that was very inefficient, and they didn't deliver. So I made the reading book, and I arrived 15 days before of the seminar in New York, and I called them, look, I don't have the reading book, how can I participate in the seminar? And then they sent to me overnight the reading book, and then there were several chapters on the virtue of selfishness, and another work called Capitalism, the Non-Ideal. And I was taken immediately by Ayn Rand's ideas. I was a law student here in Porto Alegre, in the Federal University, and I was shocked. How come no professor had mentioned Ayn Rand's work, Objectivism? That to me seemed something that should be, everybody should know. So I was very lucky in this seminar because it was present there an author called Rothschild who died very early. He was one of the panelists, and he was an enthusiast of Ayn Rand's idea, even though he broke up with her before her death. So in that summer in 1982, it was the year that Ayn Rand died. I took another course this same year in the Foundation for Economic Education, and I also had the opportunity to get to know Leonard Reed, who was the president of FEE, who was a great admirer of Ayn Rand. And he supported me to continue to read her ideas. I come back to Porto Alegre after 2 months in the United States. I spent another month there reading Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. And I come back here to school, to law school, with my ideas upside down. I had become a libertarian. And I started to talk with my father. He was a professor at the University of Labor Law, and he was a judge, a labor judge. The first thing that my father said was the following: look, this is the principle of schizophrenia. So Ayn Rand's ideas created me a family problem. And in law school, I started to try to disseminate Ayn Rand's ideas. I was a contemporary of Leonidas also, and I found in him a friend and a partner to exchange ideas. And I started to place in the boards in the university phrases by Ayn Rand and also other writers. One of the things that were more important in my experience with Objectivism and Ayn Rand was triggering my interest for the idea of freedom. And here it was mentioned the fact that Ayn Rand was a woman and the fact that she was a philosopher and she developed this philosophy of freedom. And I just wanted to remember here that another thing that I found out in that period, that by chance there are 2 other women that were very important in the dissemination of the ideas of freedom. They were contemporary and friends with Ayn Rand, and they are not well known here in Brazil. One is Rose Ling. She wrote a book called The Discovery of Freedom. It was published in 1943, the same year that The Fountainhead was published. And there is a third exceptional woman who is Isabel Patterson, and she wrote The God of the Machine. So it's an alignment of stars when you think that in 1943, under the shadow of the Second World War, the United States, taken by this tax fervor to finance the war, the control mechanisms that were introduced by the New Deal and Roosevelt, we had these three women with an exceptional quality of communication and who wrote works that are classics today. So in summary, this was my experience and the impact that it had in me. Later I worked reviewing this translation of Ayn Rand's work, and I also worked in reviewing three books of Hayek. So I developed some intellectual work. I'm not a communicator. I prefer the universe of writing than speaking. I don't have the same ability that you do, but this is a summary that I would like to pass on here to you.
We have the similarity of have been impacted by the law from labor law since our discovery of liberty rights. I could think that you were an objectivist. This is interesting because I have no intellectual background to describe myself, and it's something that is lacking in me. It is the important role that you have when you have events like this, that you can have more contact and left apart the laziness of read, start to read, understand the roots or the origin of thinking. So I will pass the table to André. Without a theoretical knowledge or the practice of the Ayn Rand's ideas, which do you think is the biggest challenge in your personal view from the door outside? How to understand these theories? You put them in practice in a country that it's not a doctrine, but we have a brainwash since childhood not to understand the ideas of liberty and freedom. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and know you. To put things in context, the first contact that I have with Ayn Rand, it was through movies. The movie was called Unleashed Passions. I don't know how is it called in English. Then it was Fountainhead. This movie was with Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal. It was a story about an architect, and it put the ideas. It was a script writer that went out to Soviet Union, and then she wrote her first novel. It was a bigger success, and watching this movie, I could understand some of the ideas. Personally, in the 80s, by the beginning of the 80s, I was participating in the Institute of Entrepreneurial Studies like Winston and Leonidas, here mentioned, Zamanovich as well. And at that point, we were very concerned with, I was a president at the time, and we were very concerned, yes, we have the technical reasons for the economy, the politics, behavior, but there is something missing, there's something lacking, philosophy, it was not a well-received word. I am an entrepreneur, I don't have a greater contact with philosophical issues, but there is something lacking to be the basis of, to make sense. And why this market economy? Because it's better, or we had a pragmatic think. It's better because it works and other experience didn't. It is best because it brings more benefits. So it was something very personal, and I wanted to know for myself. I was interested to know I'm going to live once. I want to know the truth. I know to be able to conduct myself. I want to know the essence of things. I don't want to understand just the idea of market and the state of law. Capitalism was a bad word. So I want to defend that, but I want to have a theoretical background that could back me to understand things. It was not about the others, it was about me. It was something personal to understand how things work, to understand the truth. And at this time, I could learn about the first works of Ayn Rand, the fundamental work, speech that she has delivered, the importance of philosophy, and then she talked to the mariners from West Point why philosophy was important. It was a small text, everyone could read, and if you think about a man from the army, they are refractory to philosophy. This is something that had a great impact on me. And as one of the directors of the Freedom Institute at the time, I decided that what was lacking, this basic philosophical understanding to be able to deal with any subject, to be able to use the philosophical method and Ayn Rand's ideas, and back to the basis. Review your premises, check if it is true, and then you could deal with any subject, no matter the deepness. Everyone here in Brazil is like a soccer commentator. They give hints about everything. They have their way of thinking. They are always telling something without making any analysis, without making any retrospect to come back to the basics. So review your premises, back to the basis, and then you could evolve and deal properly with any subject. So that moment we understood that was this link missing to how to defend the free market, how to defend the capitalism, the entrepreneur. It could only be well done when you could have the philosophical background that would defend the ethics, that the capitalism is better because the only one which is ethics, that has morals, that has a moral system for the man and not the others. And this is the basic defense. Then we have New Zealand, where they undergone a great political and economical change. And even so, if you adopt all the characteristics of a market economy, New Zealand has grown a lot, but the people continue to vote on the socialists. So the ethics defense and the moral is the main thing. And Ayn Rand has brought us this. So because of this entrepreneurial institute, we started to publish. We had several publishings, and then we started in 1990 something. We started, and it was meant to shock. Ayn Rand wanted to shock. She chose the name selfishness, that she was not worried about the language. She could have chosen the rational thinking, something different, but she chose this. She wanted to use, it is a word that we don't like to use for more than 2,000 years. And it's inside everyone, all our civilization. And after Aristotle, it was her who brought this. And this is the consistent defense and and the necessary defense. That's what we are going to walk towards freedom. All the socialist experiences were very bad. They had a very bad way of finishing. So we are not going to have success if we don't have this defense that capitalism is the only moral and ethic system. So very well. Just adding a little bit of pepper, it was perfect what you said. It happens the same things with us. We are undergoing reform here in Brazil, which is the welfare, social security register. So people said that you are only worried about paying less taxes. You are just worried with the economy. No, liberalism, it comes before the conservator ones. The liberal defends much more things for moral principles and not practical issues to pay less taxes. To pay less taxes would be a consequence because you defend the private property, the natural right that man has to life and property. So to have the ethical and moral basis to defend the pragmatical issues that you're going to defend later on is fundamental. So let's pay less taxes. No, that's not it. I am for it because there is intellectual basis for that. So now our very special guest, I can't pronounce your name in the adequate way, Tsfany. Tsfany is correct? This is fancier. How a range has impacted your life and how it's from curiosity, as how people from outside they think about Brazil. Do they think that we have potential to develop ideas? How would you see?
So my story with Ayn Rand, I will follow up after this presentation in more detail, but I just have to say that since I can remember myself, I was always a kid that was asking why. Why? And it was, put me in a lot of trouble sometimes. And I will tell you some of the troubles of asking, why should I put a yarmulke, kippah on? Why? And asking questions. And I never was introduced with the idea that philosophy is where I should find the answers. Always was attracted more to science because that's where things would make sense to me. In science, 2 and 2 equals 4. And in other areas, it's all kind of gray, it's subjective, what he thinks, what she thinks, and nobody really knows. And so as I was in my teen years, I got more interested in physics. I said, maybe the meaning for life is in physics. So I started learning about physics and modern physics and so on and so forth. And then when it was time to select what I wanted to do, I said, I'll just go to engineering because that's the clearest things I can do. And I led my life pretty confused about what life is about, what you should be doing. So there was like a part of my life that was clear, my career, my work, software, and other areas of morality, purpose that was kind of unclear, subjective. And I basically went with the flow. I did what everybody did. And one day somebody introduces me to Ayn Rand. It was not long ago. It was 9 years ago. And gives me Atlas Shrugged. And I open Atlas Shrugged and it just explodes in my face. Literally like third way in, I had to stop. I said, this is something completely different. This is more than anything, a science for life. And that is, I guess, what philosophy is. So I put Atlas aside, and I said, "There's much more to it." I love the story, But it's much more meaningful than just this. And before I finish this book, I want to investigate what it is that is called philosophy. And then I dove into the philosophy, and a world opened, a world of clarity, of consistency, where 2 and 2 plus 2 makes 4, but in the realm of ideas. And so maybe because the way I think about life, I wanted the deepest of the deepest all the way up to what is love. You know, what is you know, things like we heard today, you know, mercy. What's the concept of justice about? All of those things. And Ayn Rand kind of opened my eyes to a whole new world of knowledge. And this world of knowledge is amazing because it integrates all of your knowledge. This is what philosophy comes before everything else. You know, everything is kind of deducted out of, you know, a philosophy. And this is why it's the science of sciences. And so it impacted my life. I will tell the story right after this panel in a very personal way. It completely changed my life. It put my life, because I discovered Ayn Rand at the age of 40, 9 years ago, I had to make a stop, re-examine my system, my values, everything I believed in, and started separating what is right from what is wrong. And that dictated what my moral views are, my political views are, and some of it completely changed 180 degrees. And I will tell again a little bit more about what psychological processes you have to go through in order to re-examine situations where you say, 2 days ago I thought that this is right, now I think that it's completely wrong. And it's not only wrong, it's evil. Take that to personal relationships. People that you thought are okay, now you see, no, they're destructive to me. All of those ideas. So when I say Ayn Rand impacted my life, I really mean this. This is why I chose to take the job of the Ayn Rand Institute as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. I decided to take on, you know, managing a non-for-profit, because this is how you change the world. This is the physics of what changes the world. What you're doing is a derivative of that, and you say communication is really important. I totally agree with you. I think Ayn Rand was such a genius that she mastered the philosophy, but she also understood how to change the world through novels. She wanted to portray, she understood the power of fiction in order to communicate ideas. She said only then, you know, her kind of latter part of her life, she went on to write the nonfiction and explain the philosophical foundation. So a tremendous impact on my life. I owe her a lot. I can repay her now, but I'm trying to in what I do every day. And so to your other question, I have to admit I don't know a lot about Brazil, but I can tell you my personal experience. What we're seeing here, the quality of the discussion, the quality of understanding that I've seen in Rio, in Sao Paulo, in Porto Alegre, and I've visited the Forum de Liberdade. Roberto invited me last year, is phenomenal. I think it feels like there's a revolution starting in ideas, which I think is where you want to see. If you see how history changes, it doesn't change because one person knows how to say things. With all due respect to you, I think what you're doing is really important. It changes if the fundamental ideas, and Andre talked about morality, right? If the fundamental ideas are shifting, people are like, wow, this makes sense to me. Look at the American Revolution, where the whole concept of what is good, what is virtuous, is changing. So I think I'm feeling like something is happening here, actually very different than what I feel in the U.S. In the U.S., when I look, I see a lot of decline, moral decline. The left is attacking in new ways that are destructive, changing words, changing the tools of our thinking by changing terms. And so fighting for words, fighting for the terms, for our tools of cognition is so important. So I'm, you know, as an investor, I was joking with Yaron the other day, maybe you should start looking at some Brazilian stocks because something good is happening in Brazil.
Very nice.
So So I don't know if I'm breaking the rules or the protocol. What do you think, Roberto, that we open for questions? But I would ask some favor, please make, let's think about the TV program that you have to tell in 30 seconds. So let's be short. Who is going to risk himself? One at a time.
O prêmio de...
I'll gain the award of official person who has questions. So just a comment, if you could say something about this. I see that everybody here in the audience comes from some professional area that maybe promotes more the understanding of Ayn Rand's idea. For example, business people, even from academia, that makes us to get used to seek for references for everything that we are going to talk about in university. Even you, Arthur, you are engineering, but you have this rationality intrinsic due to the way that they taught you how to think. But for people who don't have that background, or for whom it's not simple to assimilate the rational ideas of Ayn Rand, how do you think that it could be more acceptable, a more acceptable way to disseminate her ideas and to reach, for us to reach not a perfect world, but close to what we expect? What a beautiful and politically correct question, right? How to make the pot smoker from CA, how to make him understand that his daddy's money is going to end up sometime. It's an excellent question. It's a fundamental question. If I could make some provocation here. I decided to do this by exposing these people to ridicule. Was getting the camera and going to the university that they closed to protest, to show that they were being ridiculous. It's not the most diplomatic way to do it. It's one of the ways, but I really believe that exposing people to ridicule of their contradictions is one way of questioning, and I think that this you can convert people through that. If love doesn't help, maybe try a little pain. What can I understand so that I don't turn into that guy? So I'll pass the microphone to them here to say for them to say how they can take the next step to search for readings and to go deeper in the ideas of freedom. Here we have, I'm also an engineer, and we have this rationality, but we have one difficulty here, and it's good when we face a problem of communication and how to communicate these ideas that were unknown and that were brought recently. We're talking about a very recent period. The books were published in Portuguese very recently. And facing concepts in philosophy that are here for generations. So in here, there's another difficulty, and we need to understand this, which is it's necessary to use the tool, the main tool that Ayn Rand says as an epistemological method about how to obtain knowledge, how to understand things, which is reason. So to understand philosophy, it's necessary for people to think. And you cannot make other people do that. It's a voluntary act. They have this tool. How can you make someone else to use reason? You have a method. It's brilliant to expose people to ridicule, to question them. But we have this difficulty. It's not easy. It's not with slogans. It's not with beautiful phrases. No, it's necessary to have abstraction. The person needs to think, to use their brains. It doesn't have to be the smartest person, but there is that need to reason, and it's a voluntary act. You cannot force people to do it. You need to understand this. We have been doing this through readings, seminars of the novels, through contests we did. I don't know if you remember, Who is John Galt, those stickers that people were placing in cars, especially here in Porto Alegre, exposing that question. Who is this John Galt guy? Who is the guy from the Atlas Shrugged book? That's how I got to know him, actually. See, so that's a questioning. We add these small pearls, but it's always necessary to think. So we are on the most difficult side. We have the difficulty to change thought, this way of thinking that is enforced for generations. We need to be humble to understand, because we need that others that want to understand this, it's necessary for them to reason, and that's a voluntary act that we cannot force other people to do. I want to share a quick story about the dissemination of liberal ideas. In the end of the 80s, I was working with Henri Maxud, and he put me in charge of the section of ideas of Revista Visão, a magazine that was competing with Veja, a very famous magazine here in Brazil. And I remember when I started to write for this column or this session in the magazine, I remembered of a conference that Iran gave in 1962. And she started this conference asking to the audience if they agreed with several items from a program of a political party that she had chosen. And those were items from the agenda that we could today call Social Democrat. And the audience agreed. She read 10 or 12 items, and then she told the audience, look, I just read to you items that I took from the program of the National Socialist Party from Germany, approved in the Munich Congress in the 20s. And so I remembered about that conference, and I said, well, let me look here. How is the programs from the political parties in Brazil? At that time, it was not so easy. We didn't have internet. I had to go after the official gazette. So I looked for the programs from PT, the Workers' Party, PDT, the Labor Party, PDS at the time, and another party that I cannot remember now. And they all repeated an exact copy, those items from the Nazi party. And then I put on a table in a column, I placed the Nazi party principles, and then the other one, how the other parties in Brazil said. And I told Henri, this will be a problem, but let's publish it. And I was very anxious when the magazine was published, 3 pages of the magazine with that. Just to give you a summary, it was a complete silence. Nobody called except for one person who was the president of PDS, the party at the time, the Senator Jarbas Passarinho. He called Henri complaining a lot. How could the magazine have the courage to say that his party was a Nazi party? So there are many ways, but I just wanted to say to you that in the 80s, it was this complete silence. Nowadays, with the new channels and the new media, you were able to reach much more efficiently a larger number of people. I wanted to go back then to the question that she asked. You don't need to be a businessman or to understand objectivism or to apply objectivism. You also don't need to have a PhD or a master's or even a university degree to understand and apply objectivism for a person that didn't have formal education or a poor person, again, it's a problem of communication because the idea is out there. And anyone will understand if I say, look, your life is yours. It doesn't belong to others. Everybody understands that. And because your life belongs to you, you need to manage it and not let other people do it for you. And following that line, you can convert a lot of people. I think we have time for another question. Let's do the following. Let's try to be brief here, also here on the panel. 3 questions. Okay, Roberto is saying that. I would like to ask, we saw in these 2 days that there is a strong relationship between psyche and objectivism. So I would like to know if there are some studies, because I've heard that there are, but I would like for our guests to answer if are there some studies relating psychology and objectivism, cognition and objectivism. So psychology in a broad way, because I'm interested in developing this.
I'm not qualified to answer you. In the sense that I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a philosopher. Again, I will share my personal story, but there are some people, and I think I invite you to try to connect to a network of intellectuals, objectivist intellectuals. By the way, maybe I'll use it as some promotion. In the Ayn Rand Institute, one of the things we do, we manage an intellectual network. It's not just in the field of philosophy, but also in all other applied fields. And we're trying to connect people because knowledge is all integrated, right? So the idea is to support a network, a growing network. We call it ICON, the intellectual conference that we're holding on an annual basis. And by the way, they meet on a regular basis. Actually, Ben is facilitating a lot of those discussions. So I invite you to get involved and inquire who else in the network is working on neuroscience and psychology, and just read what people think. Because I believe that objectivism allows you the best tools to be the best scientist. Because epistemologically and ethically, I think it provides you the best guidance towards how to gain knowledge, true knowledge, rather than not so good knowledge. And a lot of the stuff that you're reading, a research showing that blah, 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 blah. Most of it today is junk. It's not true. So, so if you want to be a better scientist, I invite you to do those.
I want to make a brief observation. When objectivism was born, one of the closest collaborators of Ayn Rand was Nathaniel Branden. He was a psychologist from background, and he was a pioneer in the study of self-esteem. If you are interested in this area of psychology, I would recommend to you to check the work of Nathaniel Brand. And there is a book translated to Portuguese, the Theory of Romantic Love. It's very to being very quick and objective. Yesterday I was taking a coffee during the break, and I saw a group of people talking about objectivism, how important it was, and one of them said it should be mandatory to have Ayn Rand at the schools. No, I don't think so. We can't want the schools to put things, the school should be free. It's more attractive for children to see what is outside the school. School is something boring for children. I have a younger brother that chooses to watch Mommy. I have said, or Mamãe, Falei in Portuguese, and then to put in the schools, we should fight for the children to be outside as well. They could have the ideas outside. Do you agree with that? How could we do in order to make children go out of the school environment and to get acquainted with Ayn Rand? The comment that I would like to make, everyone, we like adhere to these ideas, we are being introduced to these ideas, and so we started to think how to diffuse, how to pass on to the kids. But before that, I think we should come back to ourselves, as individuals, to understand better these ideas. Let's study more and understand more the ideas, and afterwards to pass along to the children. That's what
I would just add, education in general is a very complex area of understanding how to introduce ideas to kids in different stages of development. And even there, you know, there are a lot of people trying to apply that from an objectivist perspective. Montessori, for instance, you know, in a way, a lot of objectivists believe that it's very close, she got very close to understand how the development mind works, and this is why you see in a Montessori kindergarten where they get to choose where to go and what to do, and they kind of lead their learning process. So I would say it's very complicated, and I agree with Winston. The best thing to do is just learn the ideas as the best you can, and then go apply it. And my personal passion is to see more educators understanding Ayn Rand, understanding her view of knowledge and reason, and then try to apply it to the problem of educating kids. I agree with you, they need to be outside, they need to be around reality, integrating ideas, but they also have to develop a mind, and they have to develop their ability to reason and their cognition. So it's a tough problem.
Próximo.
Yesterday we have dealt about the subject of the politician who is a follower, and they face the social demands, and in general social demands integrated state, how individualism and these principles could arrive to the politics if the great amount of voters don't believe. If the voters are not ready to absorb these ideas, how could we lead these to the politics and change and be something according to the laws of the countries? I come back to a point. We are going to transform the voters if we transform ourselves. We must be a kind of loudspeaker. We could be able to transmit these ideas, and after that, if each one of us works with our belief, then it will happen. I could add again, this is a problem that will take generations. But we have to start, and each one must perform his own work and know how is the truth, how does it work. I think the subject education for kids, because we are educating the voters for the future, and we have introduced here the program of junior achievement that works in educating children. I think this is the fundamental part. For kids, they have to understand the reality first, the identity, the things exist. And secondly, they must understand that I can know, I can have a method of knowing, which is the reason. And then you could put this idea that they should ask, they should study, they should go for the answers, show them that they have hero models, like Aaron and Rod has said, heroes that have been shown as models to be followed. In a second moment, when they have a reasoning more evolved, then to approach these philosophical issues, you think that is hard, is something that is put there thinking without relation to the reality. No, you have the fundamental idea for man's life. Ivan has said, she has talked to the Army men of West Point. Its spaceship has dropped in this country. The astronaut recovers, and then he started to look at the instruments, and then he started to think: is where am I? Is this a world that is possible to know? Does this world exist? And the second question is, how can I know are the tools working properly? Is there air outside? How should I behave? This is epistemology. Philosophy, should I behave, and how should I be facing reality, and then to use the best tool for that. What is the best tool? Another day I was watching another person talking. We are not reasonable beings. We are sentimental beings that we reason. So I will use the method in another way. I will back to the basis. We are rational beings. We are sentimental beings. We are beings that we see. We have the senses. We are a being. And then I go to the second question. The first question, do I exist? Is it possible to be none? And then I go to the second point. The second point, which is the mechanism which is more efficient to grasp the reality, and how should I behave? And then I will come back to the reason. So I can show this is wrong. We are not sentimental beings. We are beings, human beings. We have the power of reasoning, the power of feelings, and several other factors. But it's the reason that takes us forward. That's what makes us to have an objective, a goal, which is the human surviving. It's my life. What makes me someone that can survive? That's the most useful tool is the reason. That's what she taught us.
I just want to tell a brief story, and I cannot dissociate from this pragmatic view. I always try to see what's going to be the solution. I like the philosophical part, but I always think, today, what can we do? So there's a story that Kim always tells. He was in the Federal House of Representatives, and he was discussing several things involving the federal budget, and he was always talking about the golden rule. We cannot do that because it will violate the golden rule. If you don't know, it's that rule where the government cannot spend more than was approved in the previous year's budget. So we discussed about that. The commission was concluded. When he was leaving, a representative said, I will not say who, he said, wow, it's smart, that guy, right? Even about mining you understand. And what do you mean? Well, this issue of the golden rule, I don't know what that is. So we have a problem, systemic problem in Brazil, is to think that a politician from the top down will change society, and that's not the way it works. The politician doesn't come from Mars, from the moon. They come from society, and society is poorly educated. It's from the bottom up. We need to, people need to have better education, and I have a pragmatic proposal for that. Today, I'm sure if I tell that to him, he'll think that this is an aberration. If I ask you and say, you have 5 million reais to manage education in a specific territory. You can choose it. You have 5 million reais, and you need to educate these people. Would you use 4 million in a university and only 1 million in basic education? Probably not. Let's try to explain to him that's what we do in Brazil. We invest 4 times more in superior higher education and just once in basic education. And again, we go back to that argument. Oh, liberals just want to pay less tax. No, it's immoral that a mother pays taxes for in a milk box for her son to study in a public university, but never to reach, in a private university, I'm sorry, and never reach the necessary level to enter a public university, where the sons of the rich can enter and to have free classes with the best professors, and sometimes there they will spend part of their education in the student center and not in class. So we need to disseminate that, and this can improve a nation. In practice, you see the result in a short time. In 10 years, you start to see the result. We need to invert that pyramid. How can you do that? You cannot go to USP, the University of São Paulo, or here and say, well, there's no more budget and cut everything. No, you cannot do that. You need to search for new ways to fund the higher education so that the budget from the Ministry of Education has resources. They have resources to invest in basic education. And one thing that we can do is to charge for public schools tuition, to charge for parking. Why people who can own a car cannot pay parking in a public school? To do a public-private partnership, call some millionaire. Do you want to have a room with your name here? All right, so donate some money. You want to build a library? All right, build a library with the name of your grandmother for 20 years, but build it. Call some company. Here in Brazil, I'll give you an example. If McDonald's wants to do a research for, I don't know, French fries to fry with air instead of oil for whatever, it's so difficult, the bureaucracy is so large to invest in research in the public universities that they give up. Why am I going to give them money? They will give me more bureaucracy. No, they should. So you have a guy with a pen in his hand deciding to which research will gain the money, and then you know what happens. So yeah, you want to do research? All right, come here, companies, invest here in the university, and the royalty will be for you, the patent for you. But so this type of thing can change a society. You take that excess of budget in higher education, you throw that to basic education, you teach children to think. I think that's what's missing. Would you like to make some comments?
I think you're right. I think it's a combination of a couple of things. But the one thing I want to emphasize, going back to Yaron's lecture about if you don't go below the level of politics. I completely agree with you that if you progress liberty and you show people what's possible with more privatization of the market, they will see what's possible. It's going to be easier and easier. But the battle is a moral battle. You remember the word individualism, right? If people don't accept the concept, the moral concept of individualism, you will always be just buying time. Because it doesn't matter that they see progress. They want to see the decline. And they will vote for a decline. All to the way they're all poor because they think that's what's good. And we are organisms seeking values. And if the value we're seeking, the moral value, is equality or things like that, people will give it up. So I think, again, my only 2 cents here is pay attention to the motivation. Why aren't we doing it? Although we know it works, and like Yaron said, you know, everything shows, history shows us. More capitalism, more freedom, more prosperity. So why are people in the United States advocating socialism? Because of ethics. because of morality. So I think it'll be great if communicators like you understand the depth of where the war is and understand how smart the left is, how sophisticated it is of taking the moral high ground and saying, we are the good. You guys on the right, you're pragmatists. You want to do whatever works. We want to do the good, so they win. So I think the revolution needs to start with, like, no, we're the good. You're bad. And Ayn Rand solves this puzzle in an amazing way. She identifies it, and she's such an amazing voice, radical voice. This is why she chooses the virtue of selfishness. Yes, guys, here's the solution. You don't like it, I know, but this is the solution. It goes against your instincts. Selfishness, be an individual. This is my life. I am the king. Not you, no one. I am the center of the universe, and you are the center of the universe for you. And my life is the highest value. I know it's hard to communicate those ideas, but if you want to understand where you're going to win it, the long-term strategic war that we're fighting, it's there. It's in the souls of the people. It's not in their intellect. Well, it is the intellect, sorry. It's not in what they think works or not, the pragmatic mind. It's what they believe is the good. And that is the true war that we're fighting. Show them that it's not just, you know, that they have conflict ideas, that they're ridiculous, that they're Nazis, or all of that is true. But still, you have to change the moral compass of where they're aiming. And until we do that, and by the way, I agree, you show every kid on the street. Think about what they're doing when they're playing in the sandbox. You have to force them to share their truck with the other, right? They would rather trade. But we're enforcing a different morality on them, a morality of altruism, of like, think about others and not you. This is where the error is.
Pessoal, quero agradecer muito.
Guys, I would like to thank so much. Just to close then, before wanting to disseminate these ideas, first, each one of you needs to study and to evolve up to a point when you can say that is vital, the virtue of selfishness, that the title is correct, and you don't need to change that word, egoism or selfishness. I'd like to thank very much the guests, the reception that I had here, Roberto for inviting me. I think now we have a coffee break, right? And then we have the